I arrived alone, black tux, clean shave, pale blue handkerchief tucked in my pocket. Maris used to say it made my eyes look gentler, like I gave a damn. I wasn't sure if it still did. The ballroom was everything you'd expect from old Charleston money. Gilded chandeliers, mahogany trim, velvet accents, and enough fake smiles to drown in. The air smelled of wine, entitlement, and roses that hadn't bloomed in years. Laughter floated, clinking glasses followed it, and I walked into the noise like a man returning to the scene of a quiet crime. I scanned for her. Then I saw her, Maris. That crimson dress wrapped her like it belonged to someone else. Someone unbothered, someone untouchable. She was laughing at something some guy said. He had the look of a hedge fund brat, the kind who confuses cruelty with charm. She touched his arm. That used to be me. "This is the night we show them we're okay," I whispered. "You can stop pretending to hate me. Just for one night." I adjusted my cufflinks, remembered every donor in the room, and stepped forward. The space between us felt like a canyon, but I crossed it anyway. Every step rehearsed. Smile, nod, handshakes. I could do this in my sleep. I had done it in my sleep. She saw me. Her face shifted, not surprised, just cold, like I was a mistake she'd already forgiven herself for. "Dance?" I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes gave consent wrapped in resentment. She placed her hand in mine like it was a prop, light enough to fool the crowd, heavy enough to remind me I was alone. "Smile," I whispered. "Let's not perform our pain." We stepped into the light. Jazz played. Camera shutters clicked like insects. The world slowed for just a moment. Then I leaned in. Not for anything foolish, just her cheek. A simple kiss, a gesture of peace, of endurance, of "we're still here." Her hand moved so fast I didn't process it until I heard it. That sharp sound, her palm against my face. 1,000 voices gasped, but none louder than my silence. The band stopped playing. The waiter froze mid-pour. Conversations collapsed into a vacuum. "Don't touch me," she said loud and clean. No crack in her voice, just a blade. I stood there, red-cheeked, red-faced, red-handed, not from guilt, but from the ridiculous hope that maybe she still cared. I saw Junia, our daughter, on the second-floor balcony. Her hands gripped the railing. Her face, confused, wounded. I wanted to wave, to explain, but what's the point? The gala was no longer a fundraiser. It was a battlefield, a stage, and I was the fool who missed the dress rehearsal. I turned. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. They just parted, like the scene didn't involve them, like I was some scene they'd seen too many times on TV. The restroom mirror told the truth I didn't want. A pink print bloomed on my cheek. My eyes? Well, they looked older than I remembered. "You knew," I said to the glass. "You just didn't want to believe it." The missed texts, the late returns, the perfume I didn't buy. I reached into my pocket. That damn handkerchief, I'd held onto it like it mattered, like she meant the words she once said. How stupid. Funny thing about pain, it never shows up with a warning. But once it's there, it owns the room. A quote echoed in my mind. Something a therapist once told me during a session I went to alone. "The ones who hurt us worst are the ones who once made us feel safest." I looked at the mirror again, this time, not to see the wound, but to see the man who'd finally stopped lying to himself. "If she wanted freedom," I whispered, folding the handkerchief into a fist, "she's about to get all of it." The drive home felt longer than it should have. Charleston streets blurred past me in silence. No music, no radio, not even the hum of a podcast to distract me. I parked in the circular drive behind Maris's car. She was already home. Of course she was. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with quiet. Not peace, just quiet. The kind of silence that watches you, that waits for your next wrong move. My shoes clicked against the marble floor, echoing through the halls lined with oil portraits of men who built legacies, Dillard men, all of them staring forward with pride that no longer belonged to me. If they could have turned their heads to glare, they would have. I didn't see Maris, didn't call out either. I walked past the housekeeper. She lowered her eyes and vanished into another room. That said more than any headline would. The slap had traveled faster than I had. I went straight to the study. Same room where I asked her to marry me 16 years ago, right in front of the fireplace. I poured a drink. No toast, no thoughts, just habit. 10 minutes passed before I heard the creak of the door. Orson stepped in, no knock, no warning. Tie loose, voice already in damage control mode. "You should have walked away," he said quietly, like I was the child and he was the uncle fixing my mess. I didn't respond. "You know how this looks, right? Sponsors are already asking questions. You could have diffused it." "I was slapped, Orson." "Yeah, and you let it land. In public." He left before I could answer. Then Violet showed up. Maris's cousin, the family's designated sympathizer when it came to optics. She didn't bother with small talk. "Do you even understand what you've done?" she hissed. "You made her look unstable in front of half the donor board." She hit me. She cracked under pressure because you kept pushing. You always do. Nobody said her name. Nobody said Maris, just her, like it was a crime to name the woman who'd cracked the mask. What they cared about wasn't the slap. It was the scene, the spectacle, the stain it left on their reputation. I wasn't their family anymore, just collateral. I looked up the staircase and saw Junia. She didn't say anything. She just watched me like she wasn't sure whose side she was supposed to be on. Later, alone again in the study, I opened my laptop. An email had landed in my inbox. It was forwarded from Maris's assistant. A letter, not a note, not an apology. A letter proposing a short-term marital separation for professional distancing. Her words, not mine. Dated 3 days before the gala. She planned it, every bit of it. She knew cameras would be there, knew who would be watching. She wanted it to be public. She wanted it to be final. And she knew I wouldn't fight back. She wrote, "He's too passive to retaliate. He'll take the shame and walk away. It's cleaner this way." That line didn't cut. It carved. I sat there staring at the screen, mouse still in my hand, my fingers numb. "So this was war," I whispered, and I didn't even know I was on the battlefield. I closed the laptop, then opened it again. I read the letter a second time, but not as a husband, as a strategist. If she wanted professional distance, she'd get it, right along with the kind of exposure that couldn't be curated or contained. The crest above the fireplace caught my eye. The Dillard symbol of honor, tradition, legacy. It used to be a decoration. Now it felt like a dare. My voice was flat when I said, "You want a clean break, Maris? Let's make it unforgettable." I drafted a reply to her assistant. No venom, just clarity. Subject line, "Let's give them something to talk about." Then I stared at the blinking cursor. I knew I had one night left to mourn, and then I'd stop mourning. The mourning came heavy, the kind that presses on your chest before you even open your eyes. I'd barely slept. Coffee in hand, I wandered the west wing of the house. The air there always smelled different, colder, older, like the house itself had secrets I was never meant to learn. My steps followed the same path I'd walked as a boy when my father still ran this place. But now I wasn't a boy, and this wasn't just a hallway. At the far end stood the door I'd never asked about. Always locked, always dismissed. Maris used to wave her hand. "Not for you." That was enough for me then. But today the door was ajar, not wide, just enough for a sliver of stale air to slip out, like old fabric and regret mixed into one. My fingers hesitated on the knob before I pushed. Dust blanketed the furniture, but not uniformly. It had been disturbed, a trail of someone else's footsteps inside. A jewelry box lay open on the dresser, delicate and out of place, filled with trinkets that weren't mine or hers. I stepped further in, scanning the corners. Curtains drawn tight, a faint impression on the chair cushion. This wasn't an untouched relic. Someone had been here recently. It felt like stepping into a diary left open on purpose, daring me to read. On the dresser, under the jewelry box, was a stack of letters tied with navy ribbon. They looked brittle, but the ink was still dark. All addressed to Maris, postmarked 12 years ago. My heart thudded as I read the return address. Robert, her ex-husband, the man she said had died in an accident. I untied the ribbon and slid one letter out. His handwriting was neat but frantic, pleading. You don't have to hide from them. Let me in again. Another said, I can take you and the baby anywhere you want. We'll be safe. A photograph slipped loose. Maris, younger, radiant, visibly pregnant. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my knees threatening to give. The math wasn't hard. Junia's age, the timing, the stories Maris told me. The betrayal wasn't just the lie, it was the years I lived inside it, blindfolded. A whole narrative built to keep me docile, to keep me quiet. I closed my eyes, and memories lined up like dominoes. The moves she'd made, our relocations, the people she nudged me away from, the way she managed our image as if it were a brand. It all clicked. I wasn't a husband. I was a shield, a reset button for her reputation. The gala wasn't her breaking point. It was her scripted liberation. The slap, the gasps, the letter drafted days before. It was all choreography. She used my silence like it was part of her inheritance. I muttered, voice low but steady. That locked door wasn't just a room. It was the metaphor for our entire marriage. Something I was never supposed to open, never supposed to question. I looked at the letters, the photograph, the open jewelry box. My first impulse was to burn it all, let it rot with the dust, but my hands didn't move. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began taking pictures. Every letter, every corner of the room, the photograph, the jewelry box. Documentation is power. I sat at the small desk in the corner, the same kind my grandfather used, and started writing. Not to Maris, to my lawyer. The words came measured, not bitter. There's a narrative they've written. I'll write mine now, with evidence. For the first time since the gala, I felt the tremor in my chest settle into something solid. Not rage, not grief, strategy. I rose, tucking the letters back into their ribbon, leaving the room as I found it, except for the truth now sitting in my phone. At the doorway, I paused and whispered to no one, let's see what happens when the quiet one starts speaking. The morning light in my study felt thin, almost brittle. Coffee from last night sat cold in its mug, the rim stained. I'd been pacing when Silas Wren stepped inside without knocking. Old friend, old ally. His face carried the look of someone about to tell me I'd been standing on quicksand. He set a folder down like it weighed 100 pounds. These aren't rumors, he said quietly. These are filings. I sat at my desk, the leather creaking under me. The folder opened to property deeds and equity transfers, all neat, all legal looking. My name was gone. In its place, Maris and Reuben Slate. I ran my finger over the signatures, a cold sweat rising behind my collar. How deep did she cut me out? I asked, my voice more controlled than I felt. Silas didn't answer right away. He only turned another page. I saw the date stamps, months when I was abroad, shaking hands at a charity hospital, thinking I was building a future. She was already dismantling it. I stared at my own signature on one of the forms, but Silas tapped the margin. Handwriting matches, but notary's stamp is forged, backdated. She filed them quietly. You're no longer listed as primary on anything tied to Dillard Holdings. A small tremor passed through my hands. I set the folder down and breathed slow. She's always been careful, I said. But this... She's anticipated a fight, Silas warned. If you confront her now, she'll be ready for it. She's already 2 moves ahead. I glanced at the pale blue handkerchief in my jacket pocket, the same one from the gala. It felt like a silent pulse against my chest, a reminder of who I used to be. I built this house, I muttered, and she's trying to erase me from its walls. By noon, I had stopped feeling stunned. The shock had hardened into resolve. Silas and I went over every page. I'd been cut out of businesses, trusts, even the art holdings. The housekeeper knocked once on the door and retreated, sensing the tension. I leaned back, staring at the family crest above the bookshelves. Once a meaningless heirloom, now a dare. "I'll go to the sponsors' gala tonight," I said, voice steady, not to smile for cameras, to show them what she's done. Silas frowned. "You sure?" "I'm done being erased quietly," I told him. The rest of the afternoon I spent not grieving, but planning. I called Tobin Vexley, an old friend in event production, and secured access to the projection booth for tonight's sponsor event. "I need control of that feed," I said, no questions. He paused. "You're about to start something big, aren't you?" "I'm about to tell the truth," I replied. I had Silas draft a press release, bland on the surface, titled "Ownership Dispute Under Review." It would look like nothing until the right moment. Evening came. I dressed in the same tuxedo, the handkerchief folded with precision into my pocket. This wasn't about nostalgia. It was a signal to myself that I was no longer standing still. Backstage at the gala, Maris was reviewing a video montage of last night's drama. Her laugh carried over the curtain as she told an aide, "Everything must fade except the story I want told." I slipped into the projection room unnoticed, heart steady, hands firm. On the screen in front of me, the sequence was already cued. Images of the gala with my name airbrushed out of every caption. A false history in high definition. I inserted my flash drive and overrode the feed. My plan was simple. Replace her polished story with the scanned deed Silas gave me. Let the sponsors see her deception in black and white with timestamps. The loading bar crept forward. My reflection in the monitor looked older, calmer, not a husband betrayed, but a man about to flip the board. Just as I hit play, there was a knock at the door, sharp, insistent. Security voices on the other side. She'd anticipated this. I whispered to myself, "Don't censor the truth tonight." The screen flickered, then went black. No video, no documents, just a blank field of light. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. For a second, the silence felt like a beginning instead of an ending. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and coffee gone cold. I got there before anyone else, navy suit pressed, papers tucked under my arm. No legal team beside me, just presence. A few people milled around the entrance. Familiar faces from boardrooms and charity dinners. Someone whispered, "He's got guts showing up alone." I spotted Maryse across the plaza with her attorney, her smile easy, outfit light, as if she were going to brunch, not a hearing. Junia wasn't with her. That absence wasn't an accident. I felt the drop in my stomach but kept my shoulders square. I'd rehearsed my statement over and over, facts, not feelings, just like Silas told me. Inside, the courtroom air felt cooler than it should. The judge entered without glancing at either of us, her expression carved from granite. Maris's attorney started with a countersuit motion, crisp and rehearsed. "Our client seeks an emergency review of Mr. Dillard's emotional stability," he said, holding up a photocopy. It was my handwriting. In 2009, he wrote he couldn't trust himself with anger. They read it aloud, voice dipped with feigned concern. It was my journal, the night my mother died. The room shifted. I could feel eyes on me like heat. The judge scribbled something. I closed my eyes. 16 years ago. They also described a family trip where I'd left early, claiming I'd abandoned them. It was a panic attack I'd hidden at the time, now turned into evidence of instability. It stung, not because it was fabricated, but because the truth had been bent until it snapped. I stood slowly, palms steady on the table. "I wrote that journal the night my mother died," I said. "If that's weakness, so be it." My voice didn't rise. I slid forward my documentation, emails, financial records, unanswered requests. This is not a battle for money. This is a stand for dignity. The courtroom went quiet except for the judge's pen. I kept my eyes on her, not Maris. When I finished, no one moved. The judge leaned back. Both arguments are noted. I'll review and issue a decision. That was it. No verdict yet. Outside, cameras waited. Questions ready. I walked past them into the drizzle without a word. My shoes stayed dry even as the rain fell. Back home, I went straight to my drawer and pulled out the pale blue handkerchief. It still smelled faintly of starch from the last ironing. I set up the board on the garden bench where we once exchanged vows, smoothed the cloth flat, and folded it into a perfect square. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a marker, pain and survival stitched together. I may bend, I whispered, but I will not be broken. In that moment, the noise from the hearing faded. I realized she had nothing new left to throw at me. Her story was running out of gas. Mine was only beginning to sharpen. That night, my phone chimed. An email from no one I knew, no text, no greeting. Just attachments, court records, bank transfers, a scanned image of a deed with my name cleanly erased. Someone was helping her, and now I had to find out who. The morning after the courthouse, I sat alone at the kitchen table, black coffee going cold beside me. The silence was thicker than usual. I opened the anonymous email again, this time clicking through every attachment with deliberate slowness. One spreadsheet caught my eye, titled Slate Plan B. I scrolled. Bank transfers, trust formations, offshore routing, quiet little fires set behind my back. At the bottom, a section labeled Secondary Signatories. My breath caught. One name, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. A guy who once asked to borrow money for a real estate deal. Now I knew where his loyalty went. That was the moment I felt it, not rage, precision, a click inside me. I could hear my father's voice from some distant kitchen table. Paperwork is how cowards wage war. And this was war, but I wouldn't play it like they expected. Defense wouldn't cut it anymore. I needed to strike before they knew where I stood. I traced the email's metadata to a workspace in downtown Charleston. Nothing fancy. Co-working spot near the harbor. I scheduled a visit under a fake business name and showed up with a worn leather satchel and quiet eyes. In the far corner of the cafe inside, I recognized her before she saw me. Megan Hart, Junia's college friend. The one who always asked too many questions over dinner. She looked scared. I offered her a calm smile, sat across from her. I sent it, she whispered. I shouldn't have waited, but I couldn't hold it anymore. I didn't press, just nodded and listened. She pulled out a small thumb drive and slid it across the table like it was a loaded weapon. Everything I've seen, everything they didn't destroy, emails, draft agreements, call logs. I asked her one thing. Can I record your permission to use this in testimony? She looked around, then nodded. Yes, but be careful. They're watching everything now. I clicked the record button on my phone. She spoke calmly, clearly. It was enough. Back at my loft office that evening, I turned the chalkboard into a battle plan. Names, dates, flows of money. Silas came by first. Tobin followed an hour later. We didn't drink, we didn't joke, we plotted. An injunction first, targeted, fast. But more than that, a statement. Not emotional, not inflammatory, just transparent. I timed its release to fall the same night as the biggest charity gala of the year. Maris would be there. Of course she would. The darling of polished reputations. I'd be there too, but not to speak, just to present the truth. No vengeance, I told the room. We don't humiliate. We illuminate. We rehearsed every possible pushback. Legal threats, press deflections, emotional outbursts. Silas ran point on timing. Tobin secured media buffers. This time, I wasn't reacting. I was dictating. Later that night, I sat by the window, looking out over the city. I held a photo from years ago. Maris and I, hands in the soil, planting those damn cherry trees. Back then, I thought we were building something. Now I saw it differently. Cycles, not promises. I folded the pale blue handkerchief again, not for sentiment, for sharpness. It was my marker now, not hers. She taught me her language, I whispered, and now I speak it better. There was fear in me still, but it didn't own me anymore. I studied my reflection, eyes steady, jaw quiet. It was name. The next morning, an envelope waited at the door, thick cardstock. The kind you don't throw away. It was an invitation, a donor gala. At the bottom, beneath the letterhead, in handwriting I knew too well. Let's end this civilly. I arrived before the crowd, not to be early, but to be grounded. The gala hall was lit like a movie set, chandeliers glowing low gold, every table folded in linen and expectation. Silas stood near the service door, adjusting his tie with a glance that told me all systems were ready. Megan arrived minutes later, blending in with the waitstaff. Smart girl. She handed me a small earpiece. Just in case they pull something. I nodded, no words needed. I scanned the room. Donors mingled. Laughter echoed. Everyone dressed like they had nothing to lose. Then I saw her. Maris, floating across the room in a satin gown, shaking hands, offering smiles that never reached her eyes. She didn't see me yet, didn't know how close the fire really was. I could feel the fabric of the handkerchief in my pocket. No longer grief, now steel. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to correct the narrative. The room filled quickly. Wine flowed. The host began to speak. That's when it started. The stage lights, flicker, buzz, then full-out strobe. It wasn't a glitch. It was timing, and it was intentional. The screen meant to display the evening's sponsors started a strange loop. Old footage of me, edited, cropped, faces removed, mine erased, my contributions invisible. I looked to the projection booth, one man up there, hesitating. I knew why. Tobin had gotten to him earlier that day. A backup drive waited in his bag. All it needed was a cue. Maris turned slightly toward the booth. Just a flick of her gaze. A signal. That cold, tactical look. Not the woman I married, but the one I'd grown to recognize. But I didn't flinch. I walked slowly to the stage as if nothing was wrong. A hand on my shoulder from Silas, brief, solid. Then I stepped up. The lights steadied. The crowd, confused, clapped instinctively. Then came the gift. A host called Maris forward. She smiled graciously, then pulled a velvet box from behind the podium. A small token, she said, for the daughter who always reminded me why we fight for family. She handed it to Junia. Front table, camera on her. My daughter opened the box with a cautious smile. Inside, the pale blue handkerchief, folded neatly, familiar, with a note. From Dad's memory. Gasps, murmurs. A few heads turned toward me. I stepped forward. This wasn't hers to give, I said, my voice carrying with no mic. This was mine, always has been. People looked around. No music played, just silence and curiosity and a tightening sense that something real had cracked through the evening. They want you to believe this is unity, I continued, Mezzanine, just, but what's unity if it's built on theft? Junia looked down at the cloth in her lap, then up at me. Her eyes didn't settle, not on me, not on Maris. Something inside her shifted. That's when Maris stood again and smiled wide. Let's not make this about division, she said. In fact, I've arranged something special tonight. She gestured toward the side door, now opened. A hallway into the mansion behind the gala hall. We've prepared a space for reconciliation. Just family. Let's talk. Cameras off, just conversation. Except the cameras weren't off. We entered that room and I saw it immediately. The layout. Chairs in a circle, legal pads already on the table, 2 members of press I recognized from her previous interviews. This wasn't peace. This was a staged confession. I didn't sit. I took Junia's hand gently, guiding her beside me. Megan entered a few seconds later and quietly took position at the wall. Silas placed the hard drive on the side table and looked at me for the signal. I gave it. I've brought some clarity, I said calmly. Just facts. I reached into my coat and laid out the items. Bank records, timestamps, property transfers, deeds where my name had been replaced, trusts established behind closed doors. This is what the fight has really been about, I said. Not family, not love, control. Maris laughed lightly. You're unraveling again. No, I said, eyes locked with hers. I'm recording. Then it happened. All the lights shut off. Not a flicker. A total blackout. Gasps, shuffling. Someone dropped a glass. And in the thick, sudden darkness, I said, loud, clear, it's time everyone sees who's been writing the story all along. I arrived before the crowd, not to be early, but to be grounded. The Gala hall was lit like a movie set, chandeliers glowing low gold, every table folded in linen and expectation. Silas stood near the service door, adjusting his tie with a glance that told me all systems were ready. Megan arrived minutes later, blending in with the waitstaff. Smart girl. She handed me a small earpiece. Just in case they pull something. I nodded, no words needed. I scanned the room. Donors mingled. Laughter echoed. Everyone dressed like they had nothing to lose. Then I saw her. Maris, floating across the room in a satin gown, shaking hands, offering smiles that never reached her eyes. She didn't see me yet, didn't know how close the fire really was. I could feel the fabric of the handkerchief in my pocket. No longer grief, now steel. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to correct the narrative. The room filled quickly. Wine flowed. The host began to speak. That's when it started. The stage lights, flicker, buzz, then full-out strobe. It wasn't a glitch. It was timing, and it was intentional. The screen meant to display the evening's sponsors started a strange loop. Old footage of me, edited, cropped, faces removed, mine erased, my contributions invisible. I looked to the projection booth, one man up there, hesitating. I knew why. Tobin had gotten to him earlier that day. A backup drive waited in his bag. All it needed was a cue. Maris turned slightly toward the booth. Just a flick of her gaze. A signal. That cold, tactical look. Not the woman I married, but the one I'd grown to recognize. But I didn't flinch. I walked slowly to the stage as if nothing was wrong. A hand on my shoulder from Silas, brief, solid. Then I stepped up. The lights steadied. The crowd, confused, clapped instinctively. Then came the gift. A host called Maris forward. She smiled graciously, then pulled a velvet box from behind the podium. A small token, she said, for the daughter who always reminded me why we fight for family. She handed it to Junia. Front table, camera on her. My daughter opened the box with a cautious smile. Inside, the pale blue handkerchief, folded neatly, familiar, with a note. From Dad's memory. Gasps, murmurs. A few heads turned toward me. I stepped forward. This wasn't hers to give, I said, my voice carrying with no mic. This was mine, always has been. People looked around. No music played, just silence and curiosity and a tightening sense that something real had cracked through the evening. They want you to believe this is unity, I continued, Mezzani, just, but what's unity if it's built on theft? Junia looked down at the cloth in her lap, then up at me. Her eyes didn't settle, not on me, not on Maris. Something inside her shifted. That's when Maris stood again and smiled wide. Let's not make this about division, she said. In fact, I've arranged something special tonight. She gestured toward the side door, now opened. A hallway into the mansion behind the Gala hall. We've prepared a space for reconciliation. Just family. Let's talk. Cameras off, just conversation. Except the cameras weren't off. We entered that room and I saw it immediately. The layout. Chairs in a circle, legal pads already on the table, 2 members of press I recognized from her previous interviews. This wasn't peace. This was a staged confession. I didn't sit. I took Junia's hand gently, guiding her beside me. Megan entered a few seconds later and quietly took position at the wall. Silas placed the hard drive on the side table and looked at me for the signal. I gave it. I've brought some clarity, I said calmly. Just facts. I reached into my coat and laid out the items. Bank records, timestamps, property transfers, deeds where my name had been replaced, trusts established behind closed doors. This is what the fight has really been about, I said. Not family, not love, control. Maris laughed lightly. You're unraveling again. "No," I said, eyes locked with hers. "I'm recording." Then it happened. All the lights shut off. Not a flicker. A total blackout. Gasps, shuffling. Someone dropped a glass. And in the thick, sudden darkness, I said, loud, clear, "It's time everyone sees who's been writing the story all along." The lights buzzed and blinked back to life. People blinked too. But it was me they looked at, not the chandelier. I was still standing. Dead center. Calm. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It had become authority. Maris sat stiffly in her chair, arms folded across her lap like someone trying to hold in the wind. The attorneys behind her looked scrambled, unsure whether to stand, sit, speak, or vanish. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I placed the final file folder on the table in front of me, documents still warm from my hand, transfers, statements, ledgers, a copy of a letter, her handwriting clear as day, talking about moving the assets quietly so I wouldn't notice, and a photograph, one only Megan could have taken, Maris and Reuben by the harbor, shaking hands with the trustee 3 weeks before our anniversary. I didn't accuse. I didn't rage. I looked at Junia. "This is why I fought," I said, "not for vengeance, for clarity, for you." It was no longer about the public image. It was about the weight that had been sitting on all our backs for too long. Megan stood, her voice small but steady. She confirmed what she'd witnessed. It wasn't just about finances, she said. It was about erasure, making him vanish from the narrative. Then Tobin, hands in his pockets, eyes downcast, spoke. "I knew. I let it happen. I justified it because we thought he wouldn't fight back. He never had before." Junia's chair scraped against the hardwood as she stood. Her lip trembled. She looked at her mother. "Tell me it's not true." But Maris didn't move, didn't blink, didn't flinch. Silence answered for her. Junia turned to me, then to the guests still hanging around the doorway. "Enough," she said. "I'm not a pawn in anyone's plan anymore." She walked past Maris without another word. I didn't stop her. I didn't need to. The door clicked behind her like a period on the last sentence of a long, unreadable paragraph. When the meeting dissolved, no one clapped. There was nothing to celebrate. The party was over. Not just the gala, the game. I wandered the old estate alone afterward, the same rooms that once echoed with music, now quiet like a church after the wedding ends. I passed the study where I signed my first trust, the hallway where Junia learned to walk. I paused by the window, where I once stood beside Maris and watched the first snowfall after our engagement. None of it hurt anymore. It was just over. Silas found me out in the garden, near the path of crushed shells that led down to the dock. "You didn't win tonight," he said. "You freed yourself." He was right. There was no trophy, no check, no viral moment waiting to be posted. Just the strange lightness that comes when a burden slips off your shoulders and doesn't land on someone else. We stood there a while. Later, in my old study, I packed the last of my things, a few books, the blue handkerchief, a photo of Junia at the science fair, everything else I left behind. By the time the sky started shifting from black to gray, Megan had the car waiting out front. We didn't say much, didn't need to. I looked at the house one last time, not in anger, not even in mourning, just acknowledgement, like nodding at an old teacher you've finally outgrown. I slid into the passenger seat. As we pulled away, I watched the mansion get smaller in the rear view. I didn't turn back again. Truth had become my home now. Not any building, not any title, just truth. And that was enough. We hit the highway just as the sun broke open. The road ahead looked the same as it always had, but it felt different. Half an hour later, my phone buzzed in the console. A message from Junia. "I want to see you, just you." I read it twice, then smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "I won," just the kind that whispers, "Maybe we're beginning."